use, and this is this externality that's not taken in. So we think about it as we have cost curves to add up. We're going to do some horizontal addition of these cost curves. So we have the private cost. We have an industry that supplies us with gasoline. We have big companies that drill the gasoline, import the gasoline, refine the gasoline, get it to the consumer. We have this private cost. We have this $2 per gallon or whatever we think it is. Now it's probably $3 a gallon to get there. And then we have to add up another cost curve that's the cost to our society that's summing up all these external costs that we're not taking into account. The cost that we're all paying in hospital bills and delayed time, in internalizing the air pollution, in living in polluted cities and having the health effects of that. So we're going to do this vertical addition of this private cost plus these external costs that will give us a social cost. And as it's going up, as we go by output, we'll call it a social marginal cost. We have a total social cost, but we're going to graph it and think about it and do the analysis as a marginal cost. It's going to be increasing with the amount of gasoline consumed. So this is this. We're going to do some addition, a cost addition here. The external marginal cost, we have, they've assumed some slope for. They have a level at the point that we're at. They're saying this is our starting point, and there's a level that we're at, and we're going to assume that there's some slope where it goes up. So we're going to have a social marginal cost that adds the external and the private marginal costs. So in all of these graphs in chapter 2, we'll think about what's down here. So this is quantity of gas, and this is dollars per quantity of gas, right? So our social costs are sort of born on us, in terms of dollars, but then we're going to add up these social costs and sort of divide them by the amount of gasoline that we're consuming to get a dollar per quantity of gasoline in terms of these harmful effects on us. No, the external cost could be down here. The external cost could be anywhere. The point is that we're going to add these two lines up to get the top line. The social cost, if there's a pollution externality, will always be higher than the private cost. But where the external costs are, that could be anywhere. Add vertically. So what they want to do, yeah?
Sorry, I'm always a little bit confused by the idea of marginal cost. So can I just make sure I understand?
Mm-hmm.
The social marginal cost is the additional cost to society with each extra unit of gasoline.
Sure.
Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So what they want us to think about as a motivating example in this chapter is in a run-up in price that happened historically, where the price of gasoline went up a whole bunch. Can we use that as sort of an experiment to see what happens with gasoline consumption? So the price went up almost by double in the period that they were studying. And they know that the consumption went down from 140 billion gallons to 91 billion gallons. So one way to think about this is in reality, this private marginal cost line shifted up, and we saw where demand ended up. But we can look at that to think about if we were trying to internalize these external costs. So the key points here would be these levels of consumption and these different prices. And we've used our elasticities and our mathematical model to get lines that are going to tighten up with those points. So what happens when the price of gas increases, right? So immediately nothing happens because we're stuck with the cars we have. But in a longer term, people take that price signal and they shift into more efficient cars. And then this is sort of a backwards thing where the car companies think that they're building what car now that they think we're going to buy in the next year. So it takes a little while for the car companies to start changing what cars they're actually supplying and building. People can also, this is the urbanization question, people can also choose where to live. So if we look at the Bay Area or Berkeley, for a long time people were choosing to live in Antioch or Brentwood. And now gasoline prices are higher, and people have sort of shifted their mentality. People want to live in Oakland or Berkeley again, after a generation of people wanting to live in sort of further and further away suburbs to maintain the idea that they're going to have a big house in the yard. People now are choosing to live in cities again. And some of that is the price of gasoline, but some of that's like a cultural shift that comes along with that. So if we increase the price of gas, we also have impacts on air pollution and on climate and on carbon, right? The amount of carbon continuously that's being emitted every day is going to be reduced by a gas price increase. The amount of pollution is going to go down. But we also have issues on land use, so the densification thing. So where we need public goods, where we need investments in public goods are going to change as we affect where people are. So we have this question, that social allocation question. How do we find the right level? So the drivers and the gasoline producers, the people demanding and the people with their private costs are not paying this full cost of driving. We have the societal point that's different, right? And so how do we get to the societal point and find it? One criteria that we impose when we do a price change, when we do taxes, when we do policies, is Pareto improvement. Can we make one party better off and make nobody worse off? That's a Pareto improving change. So a gasoline tax is not Pareto improving. Somebody is made worse off. And in our society, we talk about this a lot. We say, what about these people that need to drive a lot? Like they live really far away and they have a really big truck and they need to get to their job, right? So this is something that comes up when we talk about increasing gas taxes. We have like a burden will be paid disproportionately based on a whole bunch of other choices that people have made. So we can sum these up, right? We have a whole bunch of costs that we talked about. We've seen them in a table. And we have some benefits that are coming out of the demand curve, right? So what we do as environmental economists is we need to add up a whole bunch of net benefits and add up a whole bunch of net costs. So our costs are these externality costs in this case. Pollution causes asthma, causes hospital visits. Congestion causes lost productivity. We have economic costs of having all this gasoline transportation. And so we'll have social costs that will compare to the private costs so that we can sort of sum up at the end of the day and give a benefit cost number, right? So we want the net benefits of a change in policy or a gas tax to be greater than the net costs. If the net benefits are greater than the net costs, that's the project we should do. That's the project, that's the tax, that's the different kinds of government intervention, the regulation. And the criteria that we'll do throughout chapter 10, 11, 12 is we want an efficiency criteria. So we want to get the highest possible levels of net benefits. We want some market solution where people can trade and reallocate their resources, reallocate their inputs, reallocate what types of energy they're using to get to points where we can maximize the net benefits. So benefit cost analysis is the way we're going to motivate things in this class. But certainly there's other ways to do things. Let's say the benefit cost analysis, it's the dominant paradigm in Washington, D.C., in policymakers. it's the dominant paradigm in this major. So there's other criteria that we could use. So there's social criteria, right? Rawls is a social economist. This is thinking about how do you make the worst off person better off. Our society is only as good as the worst off person. It's not about lifting everybody's boats and making rich people richer or making people who are already okay better off. It's about making the least well-off person better off. That'd be a different criteria for a tax or for a policy. Something about how do we measure where the benefits fall and make sure that they fall, the benefits and changes are going to be favoring the least favored people previously. Another whole criteria would be an ecological criteria that would be based on nature itself, the wilderness, the animals, the biodiversity. So this would be a criteria where we would do environmental regulations that would have the least impact on nature and wilderness while allowing us to basically live the same way. So say we have some basic cost of living, standard of living that humans have. How can we change? How can we do environmental regulations or taxes to reduce our impact on the environment over time? So this would be like an ecological perspective. So this is just as an aside saying we're stuck in benefit cost analysis. That's mostly what we're going to be using, but we could be using other criteria. So this is back to welfare, the stuff we saw. So I want to remember to motivate that the stuff from before the midterm is feeding into what we're going to work on after. So we have producer surplus. This is part of the benefits, right? The revenue minus variable cost is an amount of surplus that goes to the producer, but that's still part of the welfare of society. It's below the price and above the cost line. The cost line and the supply curve, we have said, is basically the same thing. We don't know whether producer surplus is going to pay for the fixed costs or to profits. We don't exactly know here, but we can sometimes call it profits. The profits are the amount that we're getting above our costs. So a change in producer surplus, a change in profits, sometimes we'll talk about those the same way. So there's a benefit to the producer. Somebody's creating economic value. It's still worth it to us to create that economic value. So when we do our welfare analysis that we did on the midterm, we look at the area under the demand curve, we look at the area under the supply curve, and we subtract the area under the demand curve from the area under the supply curve, and we'll get this area in here, and that's the amount of welfare that's being created by this level of production. In the gasoline case, we'll have two different levels of production to look at. We'll have 140 and 91 billion gallons, and we'll look at the difference between those, okay? So here's our demand curve, and we have two levels of production, 140 billion gallons and 90 billion gallons. So we can difference those, then we can subtract out the area under the demand curve and get the total area here. Total willingness to pay for this additional amount of gasoline. We look at the area under the supply curve, so this is our private marginal cost curve, if it's just the cost of production. And if we get the social cost curve, that would be the cost of the externalities. So if we look, these are our two supply curves. This is the private supply curve, so this is the variable cost of producing this much gasoline. And this is the variable cost of the pollution, right? So this is the social cost that we're getting on top of the private costs. This area is, over this area of an additional 50 billion gallons, how much are we adding to these total externality costs in terms of health costs, congestion costs, lost GDP costs? It's a variable cost borne by society as an externality to gasoline consumption. So we're going to look at this welfare analysis, this dead weight loss triangle. So we're going to say any point where we're not at the intersection of social marginal cost and demand is not an efficient point. And our dead weight loss is the cost of not being at an efficient point. So the dead weight loss is the cost of being at an inefficient point minus that for being at the efficient point. And we'll do this graphically, okay? So we have a place where social marginal cost crosses demand. This is our efficient point. We have a place where we're at because this is where demand crosses private marginal cost. This is our inefficient point, right? So our dead weight loss goes with our demand curve, social marginal cost curve. Sorry, first I'll do this in order. First it goes with social marginal cost curve. Here it goes with the demand curve. And here it goes along the inefficient quantity. So I'm going to go through this a few times because we'll have to see this in a variety of different angles and in the homework and in the final one. So we want to be able to do a good job at making this dead weight loss triangle, right? We start with an efficient point, we have an inefficient point, we look at demand and social marginal cost, and that's going to give us this loss triangle. This loss triangle is also going to come up in the next few graphs when we look at pollution and abatement. So this area here, the size of this triangle, we're going to see that as a cost curve in the abatement as well. Okay, so let's just do it without their graph. So just generally, so that we know that we can do this, we'll have private marginal cost, we'll have a social marginal cost. This is a vertical summation with the externality, or the external costs added in, and then we'll have a demand curve. So here, just really important to label, we'll have dollars per unit of output, and in this graph, we're doing it for units of output. We have 2 points that we need to know about. We have an efficient point, and we have an inefficient point. Efficient is where social marginal cost crosses demand. Inefficient is the point we're at where we didn't have those externalities taken into account. The dead weight loss goes along social marginal cost, goes along demand, goes along inefficient quantity. So this is our dead weight loss triangle in there. All right. So what they do in chapter 10 to motivate this going forward is let's think of 2 different ways we could think about the same problem. Okay, first of all, let's just graph the pollution itself and say, is there a marginal benefit of pollution itself? So a little bit weird way to think about this. So we can take a few classes to keep thinking about this, but pollution is generating surplus. Like, we need some pollution because we need to get to our jobs and we need to get to our recreation and we need to get to school or whatever we're doing. So pollution as a side effect is part of us creating value. We still want to create some value, right? So we have this, welfare triangle that's being created, consumer surplus minus the consumer surplus and producer surplus together, that's being created for each unit of pollution that we do. So for each unit of pollution that we create, there's still some social benefit there. So we have a marginal cost for pollution. That would be these external costs that we've already talked about. So in the way they're doing it here, you're still getting some outputs, but let's try our graph just so we can. So here's the cost up here. So we're still on dollars per unit and unit here. So we have some marginal cost of pollution, and we have some marginal benefits of pollution. And this is let's think about the marginal benefits as the welfare that we're getting for each unit of pollution. So pollution's going up here. Pollution increasing here, right? So let's think about marginal cost. The more pollution we have, the more all of these things like health costs and congestion, these external costs are increasing. And then there's some welfare that we still get. So we want to have some car transportation. We need some gasoline fuel being used. But it's decreasing the more that we use. The marginal benefits are going down the more and more gasoline that we use. So the first units of gasoline that we use, we're getting some big marginal benefit. We're getting a whole bunch of consumer and producer surplus. And that's going down as we get more and more. So here's the graph for chapter 9. So here's our marginal cost, like our social marginal cost curve. That's now just the social marginal cost for the pollution itself. And then this marginal benefits curve going down is just the welfare triangle. So it's important to see what's happening here. It's going to 0. The welfare triangle goes to 0 because the private and the marginal cost and the private marginal cost and demand cross here. So here's this welfare. That's this welfare triangle embedded in here, and it's going to 0 at the higher level. And so here's our deadweight loss triangle reflected. It's now this triangle for being at the inefficient point. No, it's now this triangle for being at the inefficient point. All right, so one other way to think about this is pollution abatement, and we'll talk about this a lot.
So when you say that it is the minimum cost of production, does that mean bring about the social cost of production?
No, the private. So it's the welfare that's created. Yeah, okay. The social costs are in that marginal cost of pollution. Okay, so abatement is our reduction in pollution. So we can think of abatement as like us removing pollution from the atmosphere. And this is what we're going to do in chapter 11. So we're trying to motivate this through the same graph. So our marginal benefit of abatement is us reducing these externality costs. So the marginal benefit of abatement is us reducing the disease burden or the congestion burden. So here was the cost of pollution, the social marginal cost. And so the marginal benefits of cleaning up pollution are us reducing these social costs. The marginal cost of abatement, marginal cost of cleaning up pollution, are this lost welfare triangle. So it's a mirror in this of this marginal benefits of pollution. So this is where we say pollution makes some welfare. So if we clean up pollution, we're reducing welfare. It's costing us our welfare triangle if we clean up the pollution. So in this case, in chapter 10, it's just reducing gasoline use. But what we'll get to is there's a whole bunch of different types of costs of abatement. There's cost of decreasing the pollution. There's cost of getting people to make different choices. There's cost of getting people to change technology. And there's cost to just clean up pollution itself. So a lot of times abatement costs, we're going to say, there's pollution out there. How much is it going to cost to clean up the technology we're using and make it cleaner? Either go in the environment and remove pollution, or at the place we're emitting to remove pollution. So in cars, we're going to be like, let's require everybody to have a catalytic converter, which was a huge policy question in the 70s. They came up with the technology to put it on the tailpipe, and it could reduce a whole bunch of these pollutants that could come out. And the car company's like, that's going to cost like hundreds of dollars per car. And the government said, well, we have this marginal benefit of reducing pollution and reducing smog and reducing a whole bunch of different things. It's worth it to us as a society to require you to do it. And you're going to pass it on to consumers, and we're going to have a way to phase it in over time. So this whole thing with catalytic converters is still going on. All right, so now we're going to try to think about this with abatement on the graph. So here we have dollars per unit. In chapter 10, we're still going to do it with dollars per unit of output, and in a bunch of the homeworks we're going to do of unit per output. But we got to think about what that means. So now we're going to start at 0, and then one thing is to think about is we're now working on cleaning up this amount of pollution here. But our marginal cost of abatement is increasing, and our marginal benefits of abatement are decreasing. So our marginal benefit of abatement, so this is us cleaning up pollution as we go here. This is reducing pollution. This way is more pollution. This way is less pollution. As we decrease pollution more and more, this is our welfare going away. So we're giving up more and more welfare by decreasing pollution. So this is our optimal point here. And this is like the 40 billion gallons or so that we needed to clean up. Okay, so in the other ones, this was like 90 billion and 100-something billion. I can't remember the numbers right now. 91 to 140. But this here is like the 49 billion gallons that we need to clean up, I think. Well, let's not talk about gasoline. We'll go to gasoline next. But anyways, this curve is us reducing the social costs. This is our social costs going down as we clean up pollution. And this curve is our welfare getting used up as we clean up pollution. So this is like a mirror image of the cleaning up pollution curve.